why any discussion about Indian aesthetics should begin with Ramayana is because it is the first model of literature which is complete in itself. The whole point about getting moksha is to escape the circle of birth and rebirth. I don't want that moksha. I'll take 500 janmas just to read Ramayana again. What does it tell us about a man who sanctified a country so vast as undivided India and even beyond, all the way till Sri Lanka? Why is every remote corner some random village in some nook and corner of India? Why do they find such a crying need to somehow say that Rama or Sita or Lakshmana or Anjaneya visited there? The capital of Bali or one of those places was known as Ayutthaya, which means Ayodhya.
Government of India, after having learned that the works were illegally removed from India. So this illegally removed from India,
Till now they didn't know. It's only after Modi Sarkar came, they realized that.
Right.
These are the things that nobody can teach this, Sumati ji.
Last month, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, announced that it will transfer 15 sculptures for return to the Government of India after having learned that the works were illegally removed from India. How India's dharmic wealth lands on foreign shores after being illegally removed from India is a story that will leave you feeling angry and sad and is for a later episode. The systematic plundering and loot of our tangible heritage has been happening for centuries. In the contemporary context, this stealth weakens us as a nation. This planned plunder distances generations of Indians from the great expressions of our art, of our ancestors. Many Indians are not even aware of how much of our wealth has been plundered. This stealth turns village temples' life pale. It weakens us as Bhaktas. It denies us our interaction, learning and exploring of life and knowledge with the Indian aesthetic. Indian aesthetic. What do we understand by Indian aesthetic? Welcome to Softpower Samvad with Sumati. Today, I bring a discussion with well-known author, speaker and writer Sandeep Balakrishna ji. He is one of the prominent voices shaping views on dharma, Indian history, art and culture, politics, contemporary issues and narratives. Sandeep ji has authored 5 best-selling books. He is synonymous with Dharma Dispatch, a remarkable online journal contributing valuable work to the dharmic discourse. This conversation is a small step towards opening a broad discussion on Indian aesthetic, on the impact of the plunder of our heritage on the Indian interaction with Indian aesthetic. We discuss why the Ramayana is central to the Indian aesthetic. Also, I wriggle in an idea on how we can tackle awareness, darshan and display surrounding India's stolen sculptural wealth.
Namaskar Sandeep ji. Welcome
Namaskar.
To our discussion, and namaskar to all viewers here. My first question to you is, why should any discussion or narrative on aesthetic, Indian aesthetic and the Indian aesthetic tradition should begin with a discussion on the Ramayana?
Yeah, namaste. It's great to be here, my maiden podcast show on your platform.
Thank you, it's an honor.
I'm happy to be here. So question is, why any discussion on Indian aesthetics should begin with Ramayana?
Ji.
As you are familiar, and most of us, all Hindus, must ideally be familiar that Ramayana is considered as the Adikavya or the first poetry. To put it generically, in the Indian literary tradition, we don't have a strict demarcation. Rather, we still didn't have a strict demarcation as prose poetry and drama. So the generic name for literature is Kavya, as distinguished strictly from Nataka. Now, the Indian aesthetic tradition, Ramayana is called the Adikavya for a simple reason, and why all discussions about Indian aesthetics should begin with it. Now, let us take aesthetics itself as a larger subject. like a umbrella kind of a thing. So what is aesthetic? Aesthetics, rather, it is a study of beauty, or rather a study of various forms of expression of beauty. Now, what is beauty as far as human beings are concerned? It is highly subjective. Now, just to give an example, take the example of the animal kingdom. The animals live largely by instinct because they don't have a brain or mind and, what are known as higher senses or higher faculties. So the notion of aesthetics, the notion of beauty in the animal world sounds silly to us as human beings, which might well be true. Now, you might, depending on the choice of your animal, whatever favorite animals you have, some people might find a donkey cute, some people might find a pig cute, some might find a tiger or a lion or an elephant cute, but then those are attributes of beauty that we perceive. A donkey will not become a rose just because we find, we start imputing notions of a rose to a donkey. Now, if you become a donkey, or I become a donkey, how would I regard, another donkey? What would be my notions of beauty of, my female counterpart, a she donkey, if I'm a male donkey? So it sounds absurd, right?
True.
So we have the notions of beauty or aesthetics, largely speaking, and it is a function of the sense organs, all the 5 sense organs. So when you eat something, some item of food or sweet or whatever, right? Now, sweet also comes under the larger umbrella called food, but it has a distinct taste. So your palatal equivalent of your visual sense of beauty is taste. Likewise, your auditory equivalent of beauty is music. And so it goes on. In the literary sense, meaning in the written word or, poetry, just oral tradition, whatever you have, in that sense, in those realms, it is a kind of an amalgamation of a lot of things. Now, if you take the realm of pure classical music, alap is said to be the highest form of art.
Yes.
In music, because it is so abstract. You literally create with just a loose skeleton of 7 notes or lesser notes. You literally create something new on the go.
Yes.
They have no structure.
Yeah.
They have no structure. There is no grammar. There are no words. Now, coming back to literature, when you read something, poetry, prose, whatever, drama, it is an amalgamation of a lot of things. Poetry, Indian poetry especially, has a natural, Indian languages, starting with Sanskrit, have a natural inbuilt mechanism to lend itself to music. So now, coming back to Ramayana, but before that, let me complete this bit.
Yes, please.
When you read prose or poetry or, a drama, when you read the textual version of a drama, a lot of things come into play at once. You're not only absorbing the words, the sentences, but you're visualizing a lot of things. It has an emotional impact. It has an intellectual appeal.
True.
Plus, you can also set it to music. So you see so many things. Like there's a famous saying about, some musician, I think. He writes music and sings words. So you see the interrelationships, right?
Yeah.
So this is the highest state that art can attain. Now, if a painter, a very accomplished painter, they say that, he made the thing come alive. He made the Ramayana come alive. He made Krishna come alive. What does it mean? It works at many, many levels on many different planes.
I think when you talk about that, I think there's an interspersing of actions here. So there is blending into text, then coming back to expression, then perhaps dealing with the beauty of it, then coming back. I think it's a back and forth of the different realms here, right? So
Absolutely.
This is the reason I think why Ramayana makes it not very easy, but I think an experience in a lot of depth.
Yeah,
So to
so I'm just coming to that. So this is what happens when you read literature
yeah.
or kavya, whatever it is. Now, why Ramayana, why any discussion about Indian aesthetics should begin with Ramayana is because it is the first model of literature which is complete in itself. Now, there is a great Sanskrit aesthetician who passed away quite recently. His name is Vidwan Ranganatha Sharma. So he says that all later Indian aestheticians like, Anandavardhana, Abhinavagupta, Bhamaha, Dandi, Kshemendra, everyone of note who's worth, of the highest merit, they had the Ramayana as a model to evolve aesthetic theory. The theory of Indian aesthetics, which, typically a classical composition based in the Indian literary tradition, it has something known as, it is distinguished by certain characteristics. For example, Ashtadasha Varnana, meaning description of 18 elements, which includes Parvat, Nadi, Nagara, and then you have a Purushartha Mimamsa. So certain well-defined characteristics constitute what is known as a Mahakavya. And the Ramayana came at a time when these were not concretized as theories. So the theory grew from Ramayana. This is why any discussion on Indian aesthetics begins with the Ramayana. Now, apart from just the story of the Ramayana, which we are all familiar with, more important than that is how Valmiki composed it. A lot of keys, there's a reason we call him as Maharshi. And why we call, Vedavyasa as Bhagavan Vedavyasa. Why they attained that exalted status? What was the impetus? What was the motive for Maharshi Valmiki to compose Ramayana? It was a Krauncha Pakshi Viyoga. So, two Krauncha birds, they are, इसको मैं हिंदी में बोलूंगा तो उनका संयोग होता है. It is union. संभोग नहीं, संयोग होता रहता है. Right? मिलन होता रहता है. In the most profound sense. That is, I think, one of the most intense experiences of expressions of love. And at that intense moment of intense joy, one of the Krauncha bird gets killed. It comes out as a curse. And from where is the curse come from? Not from anger. It comes from pathos. And that curse is in the form of a verse set in the Anushtup meter, which can be sung. So this is the origin of, how Valmiki actually wrote, what impelled him, or rather what compelled him to write Ramayana, compose Ramayana. So what did he do after that? He was surprised that, arey, ye to shlok aa gaya. Without my own conscious knowledge, that if I have to compose a shloka, you give me the meter. So these are intellectual exercises. That didn't happen in this case. It just came right from the depths of his feeling. Did he write it immediately? No. How did he prepare to write the Ramayana? The story of the making of Ramayana is in Ramayana itself. So he has a sacred bath. Then he sits down on the kusha grass, mat of darbha grass, facing eastwards. He folds his hands, closes his eyes, and the whole of Ramayana story is revealed to his what in Indian language is known as Gnana Drishti, the vision of pure knowledge. So the story reveals itself to him, and then we all know, Narada Maharshi comes and then he narrates Ramayana, but it is already revealed to him. And after that, Brahmaji comes and he gives Valmiki a wonderful message. He says, Valmiki, Nate Vag Andrita Kavye Kachidatra Bhavati. I'll say it again. Nate Vag Andrita Kavye Kachidatra Bhavati. Meaning, your kavya will not contain even a single grain of untruth.
Hmm.
So this is a great insight we get from this whole story. That insight, simplifying it, in a very general fashion, this insight is that if your heart is pure, your art will be beautiful.
Hmm.
This is a great insight. It is also the secret to create works of lasting value, and this is quite important to keep in mind when we talk about why Ramayana became is important to begin any discussion on Indian aesthetics.
That's a beautiful explanation.
Yeah.
Actually, a beautiful one. I think the last point you mentioned here, that it comes from within, it comes from the heart. I think it would connect me to the next question, which is about the East and...
Plus, I forgot to mention, the previous segment, that when Valmiki sat and contemplated, I narrated, the process of how Ramayana was revealed to him. What it also, the other message that it delivers is that all art, all works of enduring art, timeless art, is essentially born out of tapas. Penance.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, there's an essential difference in the perception of beauty. You're talking about beauty, which was the previous question, as well as several viewpoints on aesthetics in the West and in the East. The interpretations direct us to the cultural, religious, and geographical differences in the two, the East and the West. Is it possible for India, through a new lease of Indic efforts, to keep the Ramayana central to the idea of Indian aesthetic? You and I think that Ramayana indeed is central, but how do we create a narrative, or how do we actually place it in the current contemporary narrative as central?
This is a very good question, Sumati ji. And it, kind of evokes a lot of related discussions. Until the recent times, when was the Ramayana and Mahabharata? When were these two epics not central to our tradition? The centrality was destroyed after literature became politicized, but that is a separate discussion. After, Hindus stopped remaining Hindus. So what you're essentially talking of about, your question rather, is how do we revive this tradition of Ramayana to what it had always been? Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. So how we can do it is by rediscovering our languages. For the life of me, there have been good English renderings of Ramayana, but the very far and few between. If you have to narrate Ramayana, you have no recourse except Indian languages to bring out the full flavor. Now, let me give you a parallel example, as we call it, just as a data point. The Ramayana became influential in what is known as Brihad Bharata, or what is today known as Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Bali, Singapore, Malaysia, all those regions. Why? Their languages really don't have, much in common with Indian languages. But why did they become so popular? Why was Ramayana, held in equal reverence as it was in India? For a simple reason, because the Hindu culture, the culture which birthed Ramayana, which sustained it, also went there. The people went there. So until recently, I think the capital of Bali or one of those places was known as Ayutthaya, which means Ayodhya. So they looked up to our, culture as superior and sublime and, ennobling, which is why the people embraced it, and it also became a part of their national and cultural consciousness. So the language element really doesn't matter there in those countries, because the people have internalized this culture,
I think
and
can
then
I?
their language find words to express it.
Hmm, hmm,
So that is not the case with, say, English, Ramayana, rendering of Ramayana in English and French and, European languages, largely speaking, because they looked at Ramayana as a colonizer, not as someone who has come to embrace it out of a genuine spirit of inquiry or love or learning a new culture. They came to study it as, a scientist or a zoologist studies lab rats or something like that, or some museum pieces. This was the attitude. India discovered European languages and English at the same time as Europeans discovered Sanskrit. Over the last 30-40 years, or even more, there is an entire thriving market for, Indians writing in English. How many works of lasting value in any Indian language have the Europeans produced? Name one, just one. So this has happened. I mentioned, English for a specific reason, and this relating it back to, your question about reviving this Ramayana tradition and thereby reviving the Indian aesthetic tradition. For this reason, you have to have a mastery, if not a, advanced level of knowledge, to express your own culture in your own language, any Indian language. That is where you will be able to grasp the spirit of Valmiki and thereby the spirit of Ramayana. So you don't need to master, Natya Shastra or, Anandavardhana's works or whatever it is, Danya Loka Lochana. You don't need all that. Just grasp the spirit of Valmiki, spirit of Ramayana. Every Ramayana that has been produced in India throughout these at least 2, 3, 4 millennia, they have invariably stuck to the spirit of Valmiki.
Yes.
So this is missing today. Unless we capture that spirit, express it in our own languages, our own art forms. The nuances of the art forms have undergone, change over all these centuries, and they continue. It is not static, and it shouldn't be also. But the core has to remain the same.
May I add something here? Yeah. May I add something here? Because I would, actually want to hear your comments on what shoots off from this. When we talk of Southeast Asia and when we talk about all these countries, I think one great aspect about their insight into Ramayana, their celebration of Ramayana, is that they have, when you say internalized, the internalizing is multidimensional. I think the internalizing is based on a lot of retelling. The internalizing is based on a lot of improvisation on that retelling, and depending a great deal on the Natya part of it. The Natya part of the performance that they're in. And therein, I think there is a wide field of all aspects of art which they open the Ramayana into, the retelling of Ramayana into. So, there is visual art in it, there is Natya in it, there is music, music specific to the country, specific to the region. There is live orchestration, there is choreography, and so on and so forth. Plus, there is a continuous retelling in there. So I think this is what something we can do, perhaps, or try. Of course, there are a number of Ram Leelas existing in India. So I think something of that could be inculcated if we can.
No, Sumati ji, it is always, this is an interesting question actually, a good corollary. Those countries in Southeast Asia, their language was not so evolved as, say, Sanskrit or other Indian languages, which is a reason their understanding, their internalization of Ramayana found expression largely in the visual medium.
Yes.
Puppetry, stage performances, like you said, live orchestra, painting, this kind of thing. And all these things that, they're doing, puppetry and all that tradition is still here.
Yeah, it is.
There are innumerable Ramayana plays still being conducted. Like you say, Ram Leelas, every square kilometer you'll have a different Ram Leela. Different actors, various different costumes. So that tradition is richer here, and it is more prolonged than it is in those countries.
Definitely.
Except that a large population of urban Hindus have lost touch with these things. They would rather spend 8 hours binge watching some vulgar content on OTT than sit through the night and listening to things that will ennoble their lives and lift them up, elevate them up from their mundane shopping mall nonsense. So anyway, let me not get into that. Which is
exactly, I think, where those versions fit in. Somehow I feel that they've been able to, because I think it was after the Modi Sarkar came to power, 2014 edition of Modi Sarkar cultural interventions, and Delhi was celebrating Ramayana from Southeast Asia, and the participants in the entire festival were people not older than 35 years of age, except the gurus, except the directors of those particular groups. So you get what I mean. What I try to say here is that so there is it opens the field for participation. It opens the field for going back to the text, Valmiki's text, tradition, aesthetic, and art.
And there is another vital thing that most people might have overlooked. To celebrate, you don't understand aesthetics. Okay, the first thing, as a connoisseur of aesthetics, as a connoisseur, is to enjoy it.
Yeah.
That enjoyment should translate as feeling. The intellectualization comes later. Whether it comes or not, I really don't place much of importance to that. Does it give me enjoyment? Does it delight me? Does it move me to tears? Right? That's all it is. Rest of it, whether there's rasa, whether is this, that, those are all different discussions. Yeah. What does it do? As a connoisseur, what does it do to me? The fact that Ramayana has done this, provided at the minimum what Ramayana does is provides you enjoyment. वो enjoyment का रूप अलग हो सकता है. But that स्थायी भाव is enjoyment. That it gives you. It is up to your samskara, it's up to your upbringing, it's up to your exposure, it's up to your, wisdom. The more refined you are, the more you're endowed with samskara, the appeal will be accordingly.
True.
Of any good work of art like Ramayana. So, and to enjoy, works like Ramayana and Mahabharata and even our Puranas, whatever, just by reading it as a text or, watching it on a movie, whatever it is. One basic prerequisite is slowing down.
Yes.
Time should slow down. That is what these things do.
Yeah.
Now, if you're so distracted by a small piece of, brick which emits light in your hand, if you're so distracted by that, then wait, it's gone. There's no question of slowing down.
Yeah.
So True. These are some of the obstacles that, come when you say, we want to revive Ramayana and the aesthetic tradition. वो ऐसा नहीं होता. It needs a certain prerequisites like this.
True.
That we had. At least my generation, our generation had that when we were growing up. ठीक है, देखते हैं how it goes.
Yes, देखते हैं. Talking of Hanumanji and aesthetics reminds me of the Chola era Hanuman idol. It was stolen from the Chola era Vishnu temple. in Tamil Nadu and was auctioned in 2014 by Christie's to a private collector. It was retrieved and brought back thanks to the efforts of the Idle Wing CID and, as we know, the great India Pride project. Now, anyone who would, take a glimpse of this particular Hanuman idol would feel a great surge of emotion and, would experience tears and lumpy throat and all that. Please tell us what strikes you when you look at this idol. Also, from a viewpoint on Indian aesthetic and aesthetic tradition. So I shared an image of that particular sculpture with you. While we talk of this, recently another thing that happened was that the Metropolitan Museum of Art announced that it will transfer some 15 sculptures for return to the government of India after having learned that the works were illegally removed from India. So this illegally removed from India,
till now they didn't know. It's only after Modi Sarkar came, they realized that.
Right. So keeping a cap on the negative emotion here, it leaves me very angry. I don't know about you, but it leaves me very angry. And sometimes I wonder, how people at the India Pride Project work. Where do they park their anger when they're dealing with this? So,
if you channelize anger, you get good results.
Yes.
In that,
True. So that's a calm channelizing of anger.
Yeah, not just this Hanuman Murti, Sumati ji. Tons of such, sculptures which we routinely see, meeting this kind of a sorry fate. It is basically a genocide of beauty.
Yes, it is.
It is a genocide of culture. It is a genocide of emotion. It is a genocide of sanctity. Not even the wildest barbarian can do this or will. Like I said, a barbarian, that kind of people, they live on instinct. So long back, Emerson in one of his essays writes a beautiful thing, extolling the glories of so-called primitive people. So he says that you take the sharpest axe and the most, badass axe, and you try to, hit this primitive man with that. Nothing is going to happen. Why? Because that primitive man is a force of nature. He's closer to nature than you think you are, than you think he is. So no barbarian will do this. This kind of pilferage of beauty and sanctity and piety and all the subtler and refined emotions attached with it, this is a product of a perverse psyche which sees no value in what others consider as sacred. While those religions want the whole earth for themselves. So what causes anger in me causes joy in them.
Yeah.
This is a message of, all these murtis like Hanuman and, in this specific context about his aesthetics, it's Chola era, bronze and all that. You can take just that murti and reconstruct almost 50-60% of the entire history, society and culture of the Chola era.
Yes, true.
Just that. That is how, and this is true for almost all aspects of, Indian history or Indian civilization, Hindu civilization. So you take a coin, for example, there is a 8th century coin issued by some Muslim empire in Persia, medieval for Persia. On the front side of the coin depicts Shiva.
Yeah.
And this depiction of Shiva is in accordance with the Vedic, how the Vedas describe Shiva as a hunter with a bow and arrow. Dhanvane, he is called Dhanva or Sudhanva, Shiva. So this coin, it is issued by Muslim king. And on the reverse side of the coin, there is Shakti or Parvati. Another coin has Shiva Shiva with a familiar, the trident, Trishul and all that. On the reverse side is Nandi. This is also issued by Muslim king. This is pre-Islamic invasion when, Muslim rule was nowhere close here. So what does it show you? So you can reconstruct the history of Persia, a limited extent of that period. Also reconstruct 8th century. So where did it come from? Why was this? It was a currency coin, right? So why did, the depiction of Shiva on this currency considered both commercially viable and artistically appealing? This is the influence, cultural influence and political domination that India had.
So I think we can use such pieces as
easily.
Puzzle to reconstruct a lot.
Reconstruct it. You take anything. Farming practice, for example, in the Chola period. Use that to reconstruct the irrigation systems on that. Take the Bharadishvara temple and left behind munificent, huge volumes of records on how the temple has to be administered and, donations for endowments for posterity, this kind of thing. What is the kind of garden you should grow? What are the types of flowers that you should grow? What is the kind of garlands that you should make? So you reconstruct the whole social picture of the society of the Chola period. So in this case, this is an aesthetic aspect. So what was the school of art that produced this bronze statue of Hanuman? So you see where all the links are there.
So our ancestors were actually preparing history to be studied for history, material to be studied for history. So the depiction of Hanuman from the Chola era and many such should actually be seen in print in Indian school textbooks, I feel. And there are not many people who agree with me, or outside Twitter or within Twitter. Now, be it history or the arts or social studies. Plus, interacting with the image will lead children to know the idea of functionality and pragmatism involved in aesthetic in traditional and vernacular art as well. For example, any idol could also be part of the processions, part of rituals at the temple that they come from. An entire album of sculptural heritage in our temples and devasthanas can ignite young minds if placed and found in school libraries in the manner of representation in the form of interactive art material and so on. Now, what do we lack, Sandeepji? Do we lack the intent required to do this? Or do we lack imagination or initiative?
A combination of all of these things. There is intent. I mean, we can kind of, address this. It's a fantastic question. We can address it from multiple perspectives. One could be a lack of intent. Now, for the longest time after independence, and I keep repeating this in a different way in different platforms, the kind of cultural destruction, both in terms of scale, it happened on a large scale simply because of intent. The scale was a direct outcome of intent. So this kind of cultural destruction across all spheres, in all realms, and including, of course, our temple art and murtis and paintings and other physical artifacts, music, dance, temple traditions, our sacred literature, drama, performing arts, for example, the Devadasi tradition, all these things, everything that we used to prize as our cultural inheritance, as our civilizational pride, as our honor, right, as a precious possession. All this was destroyed on an unprecedented scale after independence. Even the British did not, do this inflict this kind of cultural vandalism and destruction that these fellows did after an alleged political independence. I still maintain that we are not fully independent.
Yes.
Unless you're not culturally free, there's little meaning in political independence. So anyway, so you had about 70 years of this kind of non-stop, unchecked, intentional plunder and vandalism.
Systematic plundering.
Yeah, systematic and well planned. Now, as a result, I mean, this I don't know where to begin, Sumati ji. Honestly, words fail me. In many cases, precious heritage of thousands of years have been lost irretrievably. There are no traces by which you can even reconstruct some of these things. What Dharmpalji describes as, native sciences, they were held by people, real people. And after the last person he'll be the only person who will have that knowledge after his death. End of story. So this has happened. Now, so we don't even know where to begin to reconstruct, to rebuild, and rejuvenate these traditions. So while in the present era, after 2014, like you pointed out, even if there is intent, and I don't doubt there are very, very well-intentioned people, the destruction, like I said, has been so extensive that you don't even know what has been destroyed. What is the precise nature of the thing that has been destroyed? Like if you misplace your nose ring somewhere in your house, there is still a chance of finding it, right?
Yes.
But if you lose it somewhere in your mountains and you come back looking for it after 5 years, what are your chances that you'll recover it?
Next to nil.
Next to impossible. So this is what has happened. So yes, and then there are, of course, these legacy vandals, cultural vandals, who are deeply still embedded in our various institutions. They are also offering, whatever pushback at these attempts to renew that they can. So yes, while there is good intent, this is a real life issue that blocks it. Then your second question was, what was that? Intent and?
My question was intent and imagination. So why I put imagination there is that when you have intention, all fine. But then you need imagination to put it the right way. To put it the way that it should be perceived, in the way it should be perceived, in the way it should be observed, in the way it should be absorbed.
Absolutely. It's actually, imagination is actually a rather appropriate word that you selected. Now, to put it again in the realm of aesthetics and creativity and all that, all creativity begins with imagination. So now, imagination by itself can't work in a vacuum. It needs a certain vehicle to express it. And it can't be any random expression. There has to be order, there has to be meaning, and then with the right mixture of the right ingredients, you get something that is beautiful and enduring and, valuable, rest of the good things. So while there is intent and while there is imagination, there is also the qualification, there is also the language and the grammar that will give shape to this imagination so that its expression in whatever form can be cohesive and beautiful. Now, you had just a generation back, I'll take a random example. 2 random examples actually. You had a stalwart like Kelu Charan Mahapatra. So his imagination, art, that is gone.
Actually gone.
So where is the next Kelu Charan Mahapatra? And Kelu Charan ji, Acharya ji, he was the successor of a long, countless lineage of the tradition. So that is why we take these individual names. When he was, at his peak, he would have peers endowed with the same kind of talent. To take another random example, Dr. Balamurali Krishna. You can't produce Balamurali Krishnas in a factory or something. Right? So yeah, I hope you're getting my drift, of what I'm saying.
Yes.
So there's intent, there is imagination, but that is not being honed. Two. Number three, where is the class of connoisseurs? If a Balamurali was to be born today, he would have been born. The point is, there's no cultural incubator to make him another Balamurali when he grows up. So we have lost this guy forever.
We've lost the era, we've lost the artist, we've lost the imagination, we've lost the art, we've lost the repertoire.
Yes. So this, you can't do this, you can't do these things by learning books. By reading books.
True.
A lot of things go into, shaping and making all these stalwarts. Problem ye hai. So these are some of the biggest obstacles in, the kind of renewal that you had in mind. But I live on love, hope and optimism. So let's see.
I'll go with love and optimism, not hope so much.
Oh.
Yeah. You've written passionately about how the retelling and interpretations of the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the Puranic treasures have not been kind to the original. What prompted you to pay attention to these? To versions that are not kind to the original in how they reflect or how they adapt or how they retell.
So you're talking about the perversions of our epics and our literature. Is that what you're talking about? I think the leftist destruction of Indian art. I think you're referring to that essay. So those are not retellings. Those are political ideologies which have appropriated our traditions to, twist them in order to fulfill or satisfy their whatever leftist political agenda. These are not retellings by any standard of the world. There have been thousands and thousands of retellings of all our epics and Puranas. All of them invariably have been faithful to the original. Now, taking the example of the Ramayana in Southeast Asia, there the hero is Hanuman.
Yes.
Which is why the hero might be Hanuman and not Ramachandra. It does not deviate from Valmiki's spirit.
It doesn't.
That's all. Out of all the people, Hanuman appealed to them. So they said, okay, Ram, tum raho apne jagah, you sit on your simhasan, have fun, enjoy your kingdom, but we will take him. We will embrace Hanuman. So this is completely in tune with Valmiki's spirit.
Definitely.
That is not distortion. That is the purest definition of an honest, faithful adaptation. Rendition, adaptation. That is a valid form of retelling. You don't injure the original. Nobody has given you the right to injure the original. But these retellings, they are perversions. Right? They are because it is like wearing the mask of a monkey and pretending that I've become monkey or something like that. ऐसा नहीं होता ना? Because Sandeep wore a mask of monkey, therefore he is a monkey. Really? This is what they've been trying to do. And I'm being very polite. I don't want to use harsh language, but
that's not here.
Yeah.
So the next question is interconnected. Do you think that a meaningful, thoughtful, tradition-aligned creation of cultural capital would help us counter the problematic interpretations of the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the Puranic treasures, as well as the Indic narrative on Indian aesthetic?
Yeah, okay. You have two questions there. Yes, there is an urgent need to do this, to build up, countering these false narratives has already been done, Sumati ji. And I have myself done it, and so have you in your own way. And so have hundreds of people. We just build on the work of past masters. I don't claim anything new or original. So this is the inheritance, that I belong to, and I consider my duty to take it forward. But the time that we spend in rebutting all these mischievous interpretations would be better utilized in our efforts at doing what you said. That you offer your own thing. You don't even offer anything new. Just the biggest problem, or rather one of the biggest problem, is that somehow all our education, including cultural education, we have developed a mentality of looking at it only through a utilitarian perspective. I will read our epics. Why? Because I'll get a job as a lecturer. I will perform, say, Sundarakanda on the stage. Why? Because that will be a career jump for something else. ऐसा नहीं होता. If you have, a utilitarian end in mind, that this is a stepping stone to something else. Casting all this, viewing all this only through a very, very materialistic lens, that itself causes a lot of problems. There is something far deeper, far higher, far more elevating than looking at it through such limited kind of fashion. So the effort that you said of rebuilding, to offer, it is good. But how do you go about it is a question. Now, every village, even 40, 50 years back, every village would have at least 5-6 people who are well versed in all these things. They didn't feel a need to rebut anything.
Yes, because
they were confident. This is called cultural self-confidence. They didn't need anybody to teach them. If you come Dasara, they'll do one, Naraka Suravadha. Ramnavami, they'll do one full Ram Leela thing. Anywhere in India. It is urbans, people like you and me who are having these fancy discussions with no disrespect meant, that these things pose a problem, and they do pose a problem because the forces which twist all these things had acquired a lot of political clout. They still matter to a great extent, and they pose a source of permanent danger. So this is the reason. Yes, they're deeply entrenched, they're deeply embedded. So as a caution, we have to do it. But then how far will you keep, looking over your shoulder throughout your life? You lose a sense of aesthetic, which is pretty much the purpose of why we should savor and enjoy all these delights.
Yes, I think what happened was that we left the interpretation of Indian aesthetic to that section.
Yeah.
So they become experts on aesthetic. You mentioned cultural self-confidence.
Yeah, I'll give you a small example of how this aesthetic operates. There was a great saint, almost a sagely figure. He was a head of a matha in Mysore. It's called Parkala Matha. So he was writing a treatise on Indian aesthetics, basically on Alankara Shastra, what is known as Alankara Shastra. So as part of it, you have to cite various examples, a scholarly treatise. So along with his disciple, he would, dictate the work to him, and this disciple would take it down. So they were reading Ramayana once. And the disciple, his name is Radapalli Anantakrishna Sharma, an extraordinary man. So he was reading out some parts from Ramayana, and then the Guru was listening to him. And then the Guru had turned his back to a stack of books or something like that. He was, listening, and then suddenly he stopped. Long spell of silence. So Radapalli Garu, he said, "What?" So he said, "Read that portion again." So Radapalli reads it out again. And then the Guru slowly turns and tears are streaming down from his eyes. And that is the part where Kausalya is being consoled by somebody, Sumitra or somebody, that, Rama is going to, how do you handle the separation from your son? It's a very, very, very moving part. The details are, the Ramayana is extraordinary. It has endured because of the details. This kind of details. So he said, the Guru said, "Look, you continue reading this portion. Whether my work gets completed or not doesn't matter. This is a kind of thing I can spend my entire lifetime." So, these are the things that nobody can teach this, Sumati ji. So if this is not beauty, what else is it? If this is not the definition of aesthetic, what else is? Where would Tulsi Das ji go? Where would Tyagaya go? Where would Tyagaraja go? Where would Annamacharya go without Rama? Why is every remote corner, some random village in some nook and corner of India, why do they find such a crying need to somehow say that Rama or Sita or Lakshmana or Anjaneya visited there? What does it tell us about a man who sanctified a country so vast as undivided India and even beyond, all the way till Sri Lanka? Why? What does it tell that, this is a land of Rama? True, it is a land of Rama. It is a land of Rama. This is beauty. This is aesthetic. Aesthetics is sanctity.
Aesthetics is sanctity.
It is. How do you box all this into some kind of a borrowed, imported, alien, foreign political theories? How can you force fit them into these, epics? You can spend several lifetimes just, the whole point about getting moksha is to escape the circle of birth and rebirth. I don't want that moksha. I'll take 500 janmas just to read Ramayana again.
Yes. I know what you mean.
So what kind of a rotten psyche should it take to, deface and distort these epics? Anyway, this is digressing. So
no, it's not. It's not, because we are moving to the next question, which now seems was part of this question. We're talking of distortions. Okay, and we've spoken about the systematic plundering and the stealth of any kind and every kind. Now we're talking about an idol that is stolen, taken away to a foreign land. Okay, and the same idol is then treated as an antique piece of art, and then it reaches a display in the formal boxed, glassed museum sense, and in that way it is pulled away thousands of miles away from its abode, which could be in Tamil Nadu, which could be anywhere in the country,
anywhere in India,
anywhere. So do you think the West has been a participant in distorting and in distortions of, obviously there is stealth, but also our idea and tradition of darshan and our idea of display? So the concept of darshan begins maybe at a temple, and a huge cycle of darshan ends at the temple. That's how I look at it in a simplistic way. Of course, we can talk about it in a lot of detail. Now, when we talk about, as you mentioned, cultural self-confidence, I see the need to create what people in the West call cultural capital. And within that cultural capital, I see the need to create public art. Now, when we are talking public art, I'm not referring to abstract ideas of art. I'm referring to pointedly an idea, and the idea might sound crazy, but my idea is that if stealth has been thrust upon us, it has been forced upon us, then why not use that stealth to create public art? Okay, now when I look at that idea, I mean that all the stolen art that is still in the museums around the world, whether we get it back is a long process. Whether we get it back has questions and various stages, and maybe not. But what if we create replicas of these? The best replicas that could be in metal, could be in bronze, and we use those replicas as public art to bring people closer to the true art, the true aesthetic, and the true cultural self-confidence which comes because of this or via this darshan. So if you imagine what I'm referring to, for example, is maybe Prayagraj, which is miles and miles away from Tamil Nadu. Maybe Varanasi, which is miles and miles away from Tamil Nadu. And there we see a replica of any stolen idol. Could be of Vishnu, could be of Lakshmi, Parvati, Shiva, and so on. And we present it to the younger generations, even to our generation, as public art. Do you think that would make any difference? Because I know it's doable. I know it's feasible. Okay, it would involve people, it would involve fundings, it would involve permissions and so on. But if the Mahakal Mahalok can attempt something so big in terms of giving an added dimension of darshana to the pilgrim, why not public art, which comes directly from an era? So it's not the actual work of art that was prepared or made, created in that era, but we see a replica of it, which is 1,000 times better than what we could, or what we would perhaps see in the form of a depiction of Shiva or Parvati or Durga and Vishnu and so on.
Okay, the simplest answer to this actually is that do whatever it takes. You want to, rejuvenate the Indian aesthetic and show it to the succeeding generations and to the contemporary people. If public art is what it takes to do that, so be it.
Yeah.
If it takes something, so be it. The point here, Ji, fine, I'm all for replicas and things like that. Now, you have enough and number of photographs of the original art that was stolen, sculptures that was stolen. You can reconstruct the same thing. Why make a replica? You can reconstruct the same thing using photographs. Right? But an even better expression of cultural self-confidence, to rebirth it. Okay, to kind of take it to maybe give it a new dimension, maybe give it a more, mold it to the contemporary circumstances, whatever it takes. All right. All paths are valid to reach the God. That is what the Sanatana philosophy says, basically. अगर जब से आपको भगवान मिलता है, मोक्ष प्राप्त होता है, then do jap. If you want to take 50,000 dips in Ganga Ma, so do it. If music is what takes you there, that is also valid. If dance is what takes you there, that's also. So this is also, go ahead, by all means, create this kind of public art. Actually, what you mention as public art used to be a part of our social and cultural life for centuries.
Yes. Today it is public art, would be. Yes.
All the melas, all the exhibitions, all the Ram Navami festivals, all the Janmashtami festivals, all these things, what were they? They were, what you call as public art, different facets of it, different methods of expression. Now, for the longest time, there was something called a Yamapata. In English, it is called picture showman. Okay. Now, Yamapata was the most famous and the most enduring form of what you call as public art. So there would be these picture showmen who would take, say, canvas or dried bamboo thing. They would make scrolls of it. Sometimes these scrolls would be as large as an entire room, and they would be rolled, nicely rolled and tied. That would contain pictures. One entire Ramayana would be there in small panel miniature paintings.
Get it.
Starting from the birth of Ram till his coronation, till the Ramapatabhisheka. So that whole thing would be displayed as miniature panels in paintings. And you would have, for example, say a 3x6 scroll would show you the entire Bala Leela of Krishna. In fact, this art emerged from the first, at least till now, what scholars were able to trace the origins of this art form comes from the first ever picture to be drawn in this art form was Krishna killing Kamsa. This was the first recorded thing as far as it stands today. And then it evolved in different regions. But the most famous was known as Yamapata, where basically it would show Yama and the human drama on a very cosmic scale, saying that agar ye karoge tum yamlok jaoge. So there would be gradations. If you lied, which region of hell you would go, kaun sa narak mein kaun sa, right?
Right.
So, and there would be ways to overcome your sins and prashchit karna. So this Yamapata was the most famous art form. It lasted even in Kakinada. No, not Kakinada. Now that Ganjam in Orissa. That time it was part of Andhra. So as recent as 1912 or 1918, this was famous. The Yamapata art form was famous. So yes, that is public art. And Yamapata became, and the pictures, the painters, right? They would also narrate the entire story to the public, and people would give whatever dharmansh they wanted to. So this was prevalent and it was unbroken. This is the whole point, Sumati ji. What you're calling as public art is your expression of a cultural continuum that is in your blood.
Yes.
That's all.
The other reason I want it done, or I desire it, is that it would tell Indians, because many of us are not aware of how much stolen art is abroad. So I think one way to do that, or the motive behind putting these depictions out to the public, would be telling them that, see, this is a depiction of what is actually real but has been stolen. So creating that kind of awareness.
I agree. So this brings me to a fundamental point I forgot to mention that in the initial thing. Why did these people steal these artwork? For us, it is an element of piety. It is a extension of our being.
Yes.
It's forms of being, expression, right? So the colonials who came here and stole that, for them it was an idol, which their doctrine ideally tells them to destroy.
Yes.
The Portuguese were the most faithful in that they destroyed our temples and idols. The colonial British, at best, perhaps they were ambivalent to it, but they saw that this has a commercial value. So the word antique, which is used to commonly denote these things, stolen art or whatever, right? The word antique itself is derogatory.
It is.
When what you have is not an idol of Hanuman, it is not an antique, for God's sake, for Hanuman's sake. How can it be an antique? Antique means something that is, dated. It has no life. It is inert. At best, what value does it have? It has monetary value. You see how your thought process changes, words used changes your thought. It is not antique. It is not a Chola bronze. It is Hanuman, pure and simple.
Yes.
Who has been expressed. His expression has taken the form of bronze.
Yeah. Yes. But
so there are countless of all these, our stolen heritage, our stolen sanctity is what I'll say. There are, but there is only a point until which you can blame foreigners for doing this. Yes. They wouldn't have been so successful without Indian collaborators. That is all your Subhash Kapoor types of people.
Yes.
What does he eat as food? Yeah. Pet mein kya khata hai that he has to do this?
Yes.
But anyway, that takes us to a different discussion. So
I think we should move to our last question on a positive note.
Yes,
and so quickly, you and I both have been in different times to the Mahalok in Ujjain, and we've had different experiences. I wrote some articles, and you have reflected a lot on it. So what was your experience like of the Mahalok, that entire space that is open to public?
I'll answer this in three parts. First part, the conception itself is extraordinary. It has provided the physical and the structural ground for this cultural revival that is taking place. That is one. But on the execution side, this is the second part. On the execution side, on the aesthetic aspect of it, it is quite pathetic. It didn't evoke any bhakti in me. I mean, if you want to treat this as criticism, so be it. But it didn't evoke anything in me that, you go to Ujjain, you go to the Mahakal temple for the Mahakal Linga. How much of beauty can you, infuse into a Linga, yaar? Like, it's not a sculpture of, say, Ganesha or, Devi or Hanuman or anybody. A Linga is just a Linga, I mean, anything, right? So, the kind of bhakti that evokes, that, you keep wanting to make that yatra again and again. So, for a project of this kind of, the scale and the grandeur that they have envisioned it, there's no bhakti, there's even less aesthetic.
The aesthetic part, agree, but slight disagreement here as far as bhakti is concerned. So I've gone through some 5 times.
You are in the precincts of that, so that bhakti is, it flows from Mahakal, who is inside the Garbhagriha.
Ji. The B part here is, what in your view is PM Modi's contribution to the building of cultural capital? Now, you and I would differ, or others would differ on our perspective on Mahakal Bhaluk. So let people decide how they feel. But as far as creating cultural capital, what do you think is PM Modi's contribution, and how valuable is it, and why?
I think he has his heart and his head in the right place, and he's a master of timing as far as all his big ticket announcements and things are concerned. This is also, culture also forms very much part of that whole process. So he has his heart and his head in the right place, notwithstanding his conceptions of aesthetics. So let's not get into this. Maybe in a separate episode we can discuss that. But he has his pulse on the culture and how it has to be renewed. Specific ideas which we will know only after he implements them, which is both a plus and a minus. But again, like I said, we'll keep it another day. So that is. Second thing is, his understanding of our culture is infused with a lot of his own experiences.
Yes.
As a pracharak, as a politician, as a campaigner, as a chief minister, as an administrator, now as a PM. So that I think he's doing it as he deems it fit. But his heart and head are in the right place. That's pretty much my take on it.
Great. So thank you so much. Yes.
I'm uncomfortable, just to place it on the record, I'm uncomfortable with the word cultural capital. But you can note it down. We'll talk about it in some other episode.
We'll talk about it. And it was brought because we were discussing East and West. And when we talk about the public perception to art, West obviously has a different definition to darshan. So you and I don't feel very warm or cozy about its usage. So yes, thank you so much for discussing aesthetic. I think it's the first step that we've taken towards a wider discussion on aesthetic. Thank you so much.
It was my honor, Sumati ji. Thanks. You brought out a lot of things that I didn't know I knew. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And I hope we go to a second part of this. Maybe a different dimension, but we do go. Thank you so much once again, Sandeep ji. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.
Namaste.